How's it going, fellas? There's a lot we could talk about tonight on this Jocko podcast, but we're not going to get into all that. Instead, we'll just cover what we should talk about, which is this very important essay that I wrote. It was actually an email. It started as an email and it turned into an essay, but that's okay. Kill two birds with one stone there. So we wrote an essay, and it is very good. Of course, it can always be made better. Of course, it can always be perfected. And that's what it's all about. It's about expressing our ideas in the public space, or whatever you want to call this, here on YouTube. We express our ideas, and in the process of expression, we engage in self-critique and communal critique, and we make our ideas better, and we learn. I learn, you learn. So we've got an essay here. Hypermodernity, Minoritarianism, which of course hypermodernity, I've got the cover of the book here if you want to go buy that book. I haven't bought it. I just watch a lot of the videos, but if you're more of a book person, if you're a reading person, if you're not the kind of person who can really only read on live streams or whatnot, go buy the book. John David Ebert, Brian Francis Culkin, with a foreword by Michael Aaron Kamens, who sometimes makes good Twitter posts and stuff like that. But anyway, if you like those guys, then go buy the book. And we're going to be referencing some of those concepts from the Ebert channel. You can go check out his channel, and there's a lot there. I mean, we're going to cover a lot of ground. It's like 5 pages or something. But there's a lot going on here, and we're going to get into it together, and it's going to be a journey. There's going to be rough roads, but it's a good journey. It's good stuff. In fact, this is probably the most productive use of your time that you could possibly think of would be listening in, following along in this essay. So the West is undergoing a massive spiritual transformation. This is very similar to that which destroyed paganism and brought about Christianity in the first place. So ultimately, the crisis that gave rise to Christianity was not something external. It wasn't the Jews forcing the Romans to become Christian or anything like that. It was something internal within the Western world, within the Roman world specifically, led to a kind of spiritual crisis. So we've seen these before. We saw it in Egypt with Ra, the monolatric cult of Ra. We saw there was some kind of transformation that went on in Zoroastrianism. So this is not unique to Rome, and we're just giving one example here, but it's sort of the most recent example that we can say formally, officially, we went from Christianity, or we went from paganism, and we said paganism's bad, Christianity is my new friend. So what I'm saying is we're going through a very similar process right now. And with these types of processes, if we take a big picture, sort of Spenglerian view and say that societies and organizations of people, the term organization and organism, they're not just phonetically similar, they're actually structurally similar. And so while we individually might not like it, pagans don't like the fact that the West became Christian. Christians are not liking the fact that we're going through a new transformation. But whether you like it or not, I don't think it validates the fact that it is happening. It's objectively happening. Whether, again, if you want to project some kind of idea of power or control onto the situation and say, well, I want this, I want that. I'm stepping back and saying, what is likely to happen given historical events? What's likely to happen? What is happening? I'm sort of assuming a purely theoretical stance, not a pragmatic stance, not a praxis. I'm not suggesting what you should or shouldn't do yet. I'm just trying to say, what is this reality that we live in? So we're assuming a kind of a passive observer stance, a state of powerlessness, that something just is happening, something is likely to happen. And what exactly is that, and how can we describe it? So these religious transitions are not in the main antagonistic to one another. The violence which accompanies them is like the pain of the birth of a child. I do not believe that Christianity was opposed to Platonism, but its child, but it was its child. who caused pain to its mother on the scale of civilization that resulted in witch burning and iconoclasm, which have been, by Gibbon and others like Voltaire, swept up together in the general chaos of the collapse of Rome, which was not started by the Jews and Christians, but by the Romans themselves following Spangler. I have no problem with Christians. But I say that while Christianity may be necessary, it is not sufficient. I believe that liberalism is the further development of Christianity. I believe that liberalism represents a force of iconoclasm, that is, a force of cultural destruction. Yet I believe that science too has a destructive element following Heidegger and Kaczynski. I believe that the challenge of liberalism is to bring it through its birth pains and to deliver it. Whether this takes decades or centuries, I cannot tell. But I believe that liberalism will ultimately give birth to a new kind of religion and a new kind of civilization, just as Christianity gave birth to Christian civilization. But indeed, it will bring more with it, and that being a new kind of species, a species beyond humanity, which will reconcile the division of instinct and intellect through scientific means. I do not believe in going back to paganism, and I do not believe that returning to traditional Christianity is sufficient. But I believe in going forward into liberalism and science as a new religion. Whether some Christians will find this agreeable and compatible, just as some pagans found Christianity to be agreeable and compatible with Platonism, or whether Christians hate the idea, does not make it more or less necessary, but will determine the level of conflict required to bring about this change. So if Christians say, oh, science liberalism, that's great. We can still love Jesus and also have science and liberalism. In fact, Jesus was a prophet of science and liberalism. In fact, the one leads to the other. Then we don't need to throw out Christianity. In the same way that there were Platonists and pagan philosophers who said, you know what, this Christianity thing doesn't sound so bad. In fact, it sounds like some things that are very true. And so the adoption of Christianity did not at all times mean the rejection of paganism. And in this case as well, the adoption of science and liberalism does not necessarily mean the rejection of Christianity. However, by me saying that possibility does not inhibit or prohibit Christians from taking an antagonistic view toward liberalism and towards science and saying these things are evil, these are lab coats, this is satanic, this is Christianity, this is the guise of Christianity, these things are fundamentally incompatible, Christianity is about order, science and liberalism represent the forces of chaos. If the Christians want to do that, and of course there are many types of Christians and many different divisions within the Christian community, if they want to take that tact, then there's going to be a high level of conflict between those types of Christians and this new sort of spiritual transformation that's going on. I'm not here to say that we need to throw away Jesus or that this is incompatible. That's up to you to say. I personally don't think it has to be incompatible, but I can't determine what everyone is going to make for an evaluation. Just as there are many Jewish and Roman cults which can now be seen as aborted attempts to bridge the gap toward Christianity, I think there will be many attempts in the right direction which do not quite hit the mark in the current paradigm. For example, Mormonism is Christian in some senses, but it also goes beyond Christianity in several directions. I mean, they add an entire book, right? So a lot of Christians don't consider Mormonism to be Christianity. But I think Mormonism actually exemplifies the type of transformation that I'm suggesting to, which has ultimately a Christian foundation, but which goes beyond that foundation in certain ways. So I think Mormonism, maybe it doesn't go far enough. Maybe you think it goes too far, whatever, but I think the direction, which is Mormonism essentially integrates America into the geo-spiritual landscape of, the Christian worldview or whatever. It integrates that into this cosmogony or this theological story about the world. So I think we're going to have a reintegration. I think right now Like prior to Mormonism, America was a sort of a barren pagan continent with no spiritual significance. Mormonism brought spiritual significance to America. Now, you could say maybe it did so unsuccessfully or was incomplete or whatever, but it re-sacralized the space. And so I think there's going to have to be some re-sacralization of space, but it's not going to be geographic. It's because geography matters less and less and less. What now matters is not connection of place to place physically, but it's about our mapping of ideas, our mapping of culture. Those sorts of connections are going to have to be re-sacralized. I'm still fleshing out the specifics of what I think is right and proper in this situation. I'm interested in those Christian minorities of the Middle East or Jewish minorities of Europe who are able to sustain themselves by making themselves useful. I have not been convinced that Europe would be in any position to rise from the ashes of an American collapse. I have not been convinced that a world led by Russia, or more likely China, would be a superior world. Furthermore, this kind of armchair general wishful thinking may be a huge waste of time, in the sense that a powerless minority is in no position to orchestrate the collapse of a world power, whether or not it will come. Another minority to mention here would be the Germans in Rome. They did not seek to ally with the Parthians against the Romans. Their success was in infiltrating Rome and bolstering its army and becoming indispensable so that when Roman elites collapsed, the Germans took over. In the current regime, this would mean thinking in terms of what is good for the minority, not the majority, and cooperating with the system. That is, supporting feminism for the masses, but not for the tribe. Supporting imperialism and multiculturalism, but insulating the tribe. So I'm going to skip a little bit of a caveat there for the sake of YouTube. And maybe when you read this script, if you ever read it, maybe it'll be part of a book. Then you can read about the caveat there. We, for me, is not white people. You know, when I look at a white person, a random white person, I don't think, yes, my brother. You know, I don't say, all is one in the Haka family. I don't say l'chaim. I don't say, whatever. As you define an in-group, I don't look at white people and say, we are a functional, cohesive identity who recognize one another as allies, who act in an organized political fashion, that we act together in a cultural fashion. I don't see that. So what is we? What does it mean when we use this term we? At this point, I'm more focused on theorizing, that is, what would be good for a minority in general, whether it be Mormon or Jewish or Islamic or whatever. If I can understand the general minoritarian strategy, then anyone can fill in the blanks. I've been developing this idea since 2017, although it has seeds all over the place. I'm now recognizing that the socio-political theory of minoritarianism is connected with John David Ebert's concept of the hypermodern. For Ebert, civilization begins with metaphysics, a system of relations which is ideal, which we strive for universally. He best illustrates this not in philosophy, but in art. Early art, the Egyptians, Sumerians, Babylonians, and Greeks all strive towards certain archetypes or iconotypes. For the Greeks, there is the idea of a perfect sculpture, and each sculptor strove toward that idea. When Rome collapsed, the metaphysics of art became degraded and reduced to a new childhood of ignorance. So you look at the Bayeux Tapestry. It basically looks like some kid drew a cartoon or something. But there's still a metaphysics there. It's not the destruction of metaphysics, but it's the degradation of metaphysics. Through the reintroduction of Greco-Roman culture through the Muslims, creating the Renaissance, the 15th century saw the return of a high culture of metaphysics in art. In the realm of painting, the Renaissance actually exceeded what the ancients were able to achieve. So if you look at Greco-Roman painting, they did paint. Their paintings were not nearly as detailed and as skilled as what Renaissance Europeans were able to achieve. So actually, We reached a new high point beyond the ancients. It seems that Van Gogh and the Impressionists, as well as Art Deco, were some of the first to deviate from the hierarchy of Greco-Roman metaphysics. Instead of striving upward vertically to ever more realistic forms, they did something horizontally different. I'm not sure why this occurred, and maybe I could learn more from Ebert in this regard. My current hypothesis is that this had something to do with capitalism and the transformation of the European economy initiated by Henry VIII. So basically, the idea that something like Art Deco is good for advertising. It's not hyper realistic, but it does catch your eye in a certain way. And so the invention of advertising, the invention of fonts at this time, which I should mention here when I go back and edit this, fonts are sort of being invented around the time. Fonts are basically invented by advertisers to portray a message to get people to pay attention to their product. So advertising, the merchant economy, commercial economy, is ultimately created by Henry VIII in his revolution of property that he has in England, spreads to the rest of Europe. Ebert does mention the salon as a fertile breeding ground for these kinds of art. So again, the salon is sort of a early, prior to the mall that we have, prior to that we have the salon. And the salon is a place where people go and hang out. It's kind of like the forum. So there is a commercial nature to the salon, and the salon is this focal point for these slightly different forms of art. I won't describe them quite yet as modern art. I think there's sort of an intermediate form between classical art, Renaissance art, Greco-Roman art, and then this new modern art that is to come. But they're not quite outside of metaphysics, but it represents sort of a expansion of the metaphysics. At this point, I would say that Impressionism and Art Deco do not strike me as rebellions against classical metaphysics. Instead, I think they represent the influence of commercialism on art. There perhaps was a bifurcation where Art Deco strove to sell itself and Impressionism sought to reduce the Apollonian lines, which represented commodification, to represent the image to conjure a dream state. So in some ways you could say Art Deco is kind of you're increasing the Apollonian delineation of the figure, whereas Impressionism, you're eliminating all lines from the painting. So it's kind of a bifurcation of two strands. Whatever the case, these seem to have been filters applied to classical metaphysics rather than an open rebellion. Though they may have seemed low or controversial at the time, I do not think they constituted a refutation of the masters. Now, I'm remembering something here about the concept of myth that maybe we should talk about again in the edit. That classical painting, there's a myth. So you paint a landscape, and so there's sort of a myth of the landscape. You have Gaia, and you have the sky, whatever the sky god would be. You have maybe the animals or people or structures or buildings or architecture. There's a mythic structure to the landscape. Classical painting, they portray archetypes, they portray people. And so, a mountain in a sense is an archetype, or a field is an archetype or something. So these are the classical archetypes. And with the salons and painting the salons and portraying the salons, you're starting to present commercial activity. You're starting to present new archetypes. Not traditional, not classical archetypes, but now it's like the common people and the regular people. Whereas before you portray the gods, you present the Caesar or whatever. It's important people, it's mythological, it's sacred. Now you're just portraying everyday stuff. So there's kind of a desacralization of the mythic structure of the metaphysics of Western art that's going on. It's really with abstract art that we get modernism and modern art, which does not have the intention of being ugly necessarily, but wants to refute the presumptions and assumptions of classical metaphysics. Ebert refers to Gebser here for a good model. This is the shift of the mythic consciousness to the mental consciousness structure. A painting of a basket of fruit or a sculpture of a man both represent a kind of myth or narrative, which Ebert refers to as an iconotype. There is something typical here, something expected, something which delightfully fulfills an expectation. Modern art creates new expectations and then fulfills them. Mondrian is a good example of this. Interestingly, the birth of the Renaissance painting, I should just say Renaissance painting, in Europe was in the Netherlands, and the birth of Impressionism was in the Netherlands, and Mondrian was Dutch as well, which is just an interesting aside there, probably better as a footnote. Modern art struggles to find the limits of the question of what is art. Is art beauty? Is it form? Is it harmony? Is it conflict? It tries to represent these things in a purer way than myth, through pure abstraction, through pure shape and geometry. But going beyond the pure symmetry of Abrahamic art is seen in a mosque or synagogue, but instead introducing a Faustian element, an element of expansion and infinity and going beyond. Modern art gives birth to the ideologies of both communism and fascism, which seek to unite the state with religious fanaticism, which the Catholic Church began to fight in the investiture contest of 1075. So a lot of people think that the separation between church and state started basically with the Catholics and the Protestants. We can't decide on which religion we should have, and therefore we should separate the church from the state. Otherwise, we're going to have a 30 years war, and we're going to kill everybody. That was not the beginning of the separation of church and state. You could even argue that in some senses Christianity represented a separation of church and state, because the Christians at one time were out of power, and so the state was pagan and the people were Christian. Now, once the state became Christian, the state and the religion were reunited as one organic entity. But the investiture contest of 1075, the Pope said, you kings, you emperors have no sacred authority. You're like a lowly peasant, essentially, with regard to spiritual matters. And there were battles that were fought over this, and there are many different tales you can look up. But this lasted for a long time. It happened in Germany, it happened in France, and ultimately it happened in England with Henry VIII, and that's when you get the Anglican Church. So what Henry was trying to do is he was trying to reintegrate the spiritual structure with the structure of the state. And that's where you get Anglicanism. Of course, it wasn't entirely successful. And you have liberalism as well, which I'm calling a new religious form. There's a lot of complicated stuff going on there. But ultimately, there's this tension that exists within Europe for basically 1,000 years, where the state wants to be religious, but the church says you're not allowed to be religious. And there are different excuses and different justifications. Protestants, Catholics is one little iteration of this story, but it has many little iterations. And the concept of religious freedom or tolerance in England is something that inhibits the Anglican Church from fully taking over. And you do have this, again, this separation between church and state that is until Nietzsche and Voltaire and Gibbon and all of these atheists, French Revolution happens. The French Revolution actually attempts to create a secular religion, a religion of scientism. And you might reject atheism. You might think atheism is stupid or hypocritical because it's a religion that pretends not to be a religion. But in a sense, by appealing to objective truth, it is a fanatical religion. Atheism is in line with the Abrahamic religions and all those monotheistic religions in that it claims to have a unique authority with regard to truth, and that everything else is a lie, everything else is demonic. And so in a sense, atheism is an Abrahamic religion, even though it will not admit itself to be so. So you have this this thing in the French Revolution where they try to create a new revolution, they try to create a new religion, but it fails. It fails ultimately. The king gets back in power, and there's back and forth between liberalism and monarchy that happens in France for a while. Really, where this comes to a head, people don't forget about this. And this influenced the Chartist movement in England, and it influences the communists in Germany. And ultimately, you produce communism, and then as a corollary, they say, well, we don't like the international element of communism, or we don't like certain ethnic parts of communism, so we're going to have our own secular religion. We're going to have our own new religion. They call that fascism, essentially. Which, in itself, fascism, strictly speaking, was a Catholic ideology, but the way that it ultimately took form in Germany was this secular thing, which the Catholic Church rightfully understood it as a threat to its power eventually. And there was a civil war that went on between German Protestants and German Catholics. It was a cold civil war. But you look at von Stauffenberg, and you look at the Valkyrie people, and you look at Mr. Canaris, Admiral Canaris. These guys were all Catholics. And they were trying to defeat Germany. They were German Catholics who wanted Germany to lose World War II because they recognized that if Germany wins, there's going to be a new religion and it's not going to be Catholicism. So there's all these controversies that go on. In any sense, this is in some ways a product of modern art. These ideologies are deeply embedded historically in modern art. They're deeply influential. These new ways of thinking, these new political modes really do have their origin in modern art. And that's hard to prove to you, but that's my belief. And they are producing this new reintegration of the secular government with the sacred concept of truth, the authority of truth, the authority of right and wrong, the moral authority, reintegrating those and creating one master system which is not tolerant. In communist Russia, you're not allowed to be a fascist, you know. In the fascist parts of Europe, you're not allowed to be a communist. Whereas for a long time, there was this intermediate interregnum where we're going to have a sort of balance of power, where we're going to have religious diversity, where we're going to have tolerance. And these secular ideologies come to overthrow that and to recreate what you could say was a pagan Europe or a early Christian Europe, where the state and the religion, and by religion I'm talking about moral authority, spiritual authority, authority of truth, they're reintegrated together. And that's what we're undergoing right now. And just as an aside, the Twitter rules change says you cannot promulgate any media, any images or pictures which are manipulated in any way so as to spread false information. So for instance, if you cut a clip out of this video and you post it on Twitter, and the gods of Twitter decide that I'm promoting a dangerous false narrative or whatever, you can be banned off Twitter. So it's more of the same, but it's a good example to show you how this period of freedom of speech and liberalism and tolerance, meaning you can just do whatever you want to do and let bygones be bygones, we're seeing how that is breaking down. We saw how that broke down with communism. We saw how that broke down with fascism. And that was defeated in the Second World War. But I think what you're seeing on Twitter now is this reintegration of the moral function and the government and the state and religion and truth claims. It's all being reintegrated. You can say that's a bad thing because you don't like that, because you're outside the mainstream. But this is happening. This is what's happening. This is what I mean when liberalism is going beyond itself. Liberalism is becoming a religion. Liberalism is no longer about tolerance. I mean, this is like a Dave Rubin point, but liberalism is no longer about tolerance. Liberalism is a religion in itself. And instead of whining and protesting about this and crying about it and being sad about it and complaining and nagging and like, let's have a protest, let's do a protest movement, let's give a middle finger to the establishment, let's vote for Donald Trump. Instead of that kind of reactionary thinking, maybe you say, okay, liberalism is codifying. How do we fit ourselves as a puzzle piece into that puzzle? Like if we just assume this is true, if we assume we're going to be living in a multicultural, multiracial, multi-religious, diverse, ethnically diverse society, but we understand that religiously and ideologically on some higher level, like the determination of what is true and what is sacred is becoming consolidated. Hitler is evil. And there's no relativism concerning that. People say, oh, well, the left and the liberals, they're moral relativists. No, they're not. Hitler is absolutely evil. And that statement is a moral statement which transcends any specific empirical claim. There is no empirical claim that you could ever use to invalidate the concept that Hitler is evil, because that's a sacred claim. It is beyond empiricism. It's beyond criticism. It's beyond skepticism. So we're moving into a new religious form where we have these lower little cults. Just like in Rome, the main religion was worship of Caesar. Now you were allowed to worship, Zeus, or you could even worship Thor. You could worship Ra. You could worship all kinds of little cults and subcults. That's what Christianity and Judaism and Islam and atheism, all of those are just little subcults. But the main cult, what is that? What is that main cult? So we have to understand what that main cult is, and we have to negotiate with that main cult, and we have to go through that. You can say, oh, let's just collapse the whole system, and maybe I should have reordered the paragraphs here. Maybe they're not in the best order. But ultimately, it's just saying we should collapse the system. Okay, well, I'll believe it when I see it, I suppose. But I'm going to assume for the moment that Rome did not collapse for 500 years after it had ushered in a new age of Caesarism. We don't have Caesarism in America. We have democracy. So I think it's reasonable to say that there's still quite a ways to go before the collapse. And so we're going to have to figure out how we are integrated into this system and not just hope and wish and pray it'll collapse and we can do something completely different. But we have to say, this thing exists. How are we going to deal with it? Again, are we going to whine and complain and react and protest? Or are we going to make ourselves useful in this system? Are we going to understand the flow of power in this system so that we have and our descendants have a chance of survival? Because again, just going the Amish route, we see what's happening to the Amish. They're being called rapists, essentially. And once you get called a rapist, and even more so, I mean, I don't even want to go into it. It's a very emotional story, but they're being called rapists. And so once you're called a rapist, the government has a right to take away your kids and break up your religious community and prosecute you and sue you and steal your land because you don't have enough money to pay the government for what they've sued you. So they take your land away. So the Amish are very vulnerable. So just being Amish, just being a traditional Christian, just being reactive, just rejecting the system, just complaining about the system, just protesting against the system, that's not enough. If you care about a future for yourself or your descendants or even your ideas or even the things that you hold to be true and sacred, you have to work out some negotiation between yourself and the state. And this is actually the position that the Jews found themselves in medieval Europe, where the state was Christian. They weren't Christian, so they said, should we just complain about that, or should we figure out a way to integrate ourselves into the system? The Christians in Islamic territories had a similar problem. We're Christians, we want to be Christian, but the state is Muslim. So how do we deal with that? Well, they figured out a way to deal with that. There's a merchant class strategy, there's a warrior class strategy, there's probably even, to an extent, some kind of a priestly strategy that you interject there. Of course, when you have a minority within a majority, the distinction there is, I'm talking about religious distinctions, so the priestly function is not going to be necessarily the most successful way to do it. But internally, you maintain your Christian community within an Islamic community. You maintain your Jewish community within the Ottoman Empire, within Europe. So this is what the minoritarian strategy is about. The ugliness of war in 1918 and 1945 led to a rejection of modernism. So modern art, abstract art, Mondrian, cute little squares on a canvas, or, these kind of fun new experiments in art, which led to both fascism and communism. That was proved wrong. That was bad because communism was bad, fascism was bad. So this is where we get the emergence of postmodernism. Whereas classical art had traditional answers to what is art and modern art had new answers, postmodernism suggested there are no answers. So there was nothing affirmative. Modern art provided rebellious answers, and postmodernism said answers themselves were violent. And that only question should be posed. So this is sort of Sartre with his absurdism. There's no answer to the meaning of life. There's no answer to what is good. There's no answer to what is true. It's all absurd. It's all arbitrary. And all we should do is break things down, deconstruct things, have skepticism about things, attack things, and pose questions, but we should never pose answers. There is no answer. So postmodernism was art of pure critique rather than of new life. It was Socrates on canvas. Postmodernism stripped away everything genuine, everything sincere, everything authentic, everything beautiful, and also threw out even the concept of ugliness and said all concepts were invalid because they were answers, and all answers were invalid because they were useless and violent. So if you put forth an answer, if you say, this is what I think is true, implicitly people are scared because, oh no, if you believe in something, then you might be willing to fight for something. If you're willing to fight for something, you're willing to do violence. And so the only way to get rid of violence is we have to strip people of affirmation. We have to strip people of anything to believe in. And so we have to just oppose belief in the general sense. Postmodernism rejected life itself, following Nietzsche. Postmodernism was the spirit of the priest class brought to canvas. So you can't affirm anything. You just have to question everything. It's sort of an asceticism in a way. Ultimately, postmodernism must critique itself. It must allow for the breakdown of all values and thus provide a blank slate on which we can develop new values. Postmodernism cannot affirm itself because it has no power of affirmation. So postmodernism has no defense mechanism. That is, postmodernism goes around and saying, well, nothing is true and everything is relative. But really, what does that lead to? It leads to 4chan. Gore and pornography and genocide and racism and self-hatred and masturbation and suicide and violence. And through the death of the self comes new life. The 4chan experiment, in my estimation, was a postmodern art exhibit, which existed roughly 10 years from 2006 to 2016. The threat of postmodernism to usher in a new system, either of tribalistic Dionysian animism or of hyper-violent gulag sex camps, has been recognized. The idea that the elites who are ignorant of what is commonplace to 14-year-olds represents the ignorance of the peasant with his pitchfork before the slaughter. So 4chan, to me, was postmodernism. 4chan was what happens when you put young men in a postmodern environment, is they just get crazy. They get violent, they get sexual, and out of that, you see people who are going toward extreme communism and Bernie Sanders, and you also saw people going toward extreme fascism. And so postmodernism ultimately undoes itself. Postmodernism is not a stable ideology. It's not a metaphysics. It's not anything. It's a big no, but it's not a yes. It doesn't say yes to anything. And so it's self-destructive. That has been recognized. People have made this point before, and they've said, okay, well, therefore something new is going to come out of postmodernism. Communists have made this point with accelerationism, and so have right-wing people. But ultimately, my argument is that the elites recognize this, and with censorship, they've prevented this process from coming to full term. And what they're going to do is they're going to take liberalism and they're going to actually create a metaphysics out of liberalism. They're going to create an authoritarian state centered around liberalism, and it's going to look like a Charlie Kirk dictatorship. And freedom of speech is going to be abolished, and the Second Amendment will be abolished, and there's going to be a totalitarian state led by liberals. Is this going to be strict communism? No, I don't think it's going to be strict communism. I think it's going to be more libertine than communism was. Communism was sexually prudish in many ways. It's going to be more libertine. And it's also going to have more competition in the marketplace. There's not going to be, the government's not going to own the means of production of everything. There's going to be more competition. In the Soviet Union, you had a guaranteed job. You had workers' rights. You had all of these things. In the new totalitarianism, I think that a lot of the protections that you had in the Soviet Union, a lot of the stability of the Soviet Union are not going to be present. There's still going to be a large amount of chaos in the system, but it's going to be chaos in the economic realm in terms of boom and bust cycles and get rich quick and then you go bankrupt. I think an element of that may persist, but culturally there's going to be a codification. Culturally, all of the massive change that we're seeing, there's going to have to be some kind of codification in the same way that in China you had like the one-child policy. I think you're going to start to see these current things which are like suggestions, like I suggest you explore your sexuality, I suggest this, I suggest that. In the future, it's going to be enshrined in law, like you must explore your sexuality. And I guess people think, would that be more horrifying than communism? I think people would be more opposed to that than communism. But I think that has to be the solution. Now, whether you think that's a stable system or not, I think that's what we're going through. I don't think you cannot maintain the ambiguity of what we have now. And so that's why you're seeing YouTube and Twitter and so on and so forth. They are pushing toward these speech codes which say, essentially, it just says, if you're not a good person, you're banned. Now, what does it mean to be a good person? Well, it means to have the correct morality. Well, where does our morality come from? What axioms does our morality rest upon? And so asking those kinds of questions and more strictly defining what is the morality of our modern age is actually a postmodern project, because postmodernism didn't put forth a morality. Postmodernism didn't tell you what was right and wrong. Postmodernism just said you shouldn't be moral at all. Postmodernism said there is no right and wrong. Postmodernism said, just ask questions. There are no answers. Whereas postmodernism, the new liberal state, the new liberal religion, is going to say this is the answer. And there is no deviation. There is no questioning. There is no skepticism. This is the answer. And if you disagree, you're banned from public life. You're banned from speaking. You're banned from publishing. Your books will be burned. And if you read them, you're going to go to jail. So there's a little bit of 1984 in there. There's a little bit of Brave New World in there. And then I think there's an element of desperation where people, I've talked about this a number of times, the level of agency that people have is decreased. So how do you survive such a totalitarian system? You don't survive the totalitarian system by hoping it collapses. You don't survive the totalitarian system by making yourself an enemy of the system. You survive the totalitarian system by having an internal and external membrane. That is, you form a collective, and internally you reinforce your collective, that you reinforce good norms within your collective. Muslim, Jew, Christian, atheist, whoever you are, pagan, I don't care. A successful group has to enforce some level of conservatism. That is, you can't just do whatever you want. That is, you can't be hedonistic. That is, you have to do things that are good for the group. You cannot bring shame to the group. You cannot embarrass the group. You cannot be a traitor to the group. You have to be good to the group. You have to go here and congeal with the group. So we need a collective that works together toward common cultural goals, political goals. Those have to be defined. We have to have an elite. We have to have a hierarchy structure where there are people where we redistribute the executive function, where some people are leaders and most people are followers. So that's the group internally. And then externally, the group has to deal with the totalitarian state in a way that it makes itself useful. And the state says, well, we don't like how you guys are conservative, but you're really important for the military, so we'll keep you around. Or we don't like that you guys are, a religious minority or something, but, you're really important for the financial system, so we'll keep you around. Or Jews in medieval Europe or Christians in the Middle East, you guys are kind of Christian, or you're kind of different, but you're people of the book. So you're people of the book. You're somehow associated with us. So these sorts of structures are what allow for a minority to survive a totalitarian state. And I'm describing feudal Europe as a totalitarian state. I'm describing the caliphate as a totalitarian state. This is the future, whether you like it or not, whether you wish it was going to happen, whether you wish it was going to collapse or whatever. This is what's going on. And you have to figure out how have minorities in the past navigated that situation. And then ultimately, in 500 years or something, the system will collapse, or there will be an opportunity for some kind of reform or rebellion or revolution. And at that point, as long as you've maintained a cohesive identity with an internal conservative orientation and then this external participatory way of making yourself useful to the state, because if you're not useful to a totalitarian state, they just kill you. They kill you, or they separate you. This is what the Soviet Union, they'll do ethnic cleansing. They'll deport minorities they don't like to the Gulag, to Kazakhstan or whatever. This is what they did to the Germans and people of the Caucasus. They just deported them. They destroyed their ethnicity. People stopped speaking German because they would take the German families and they would put them in 1,000 different villages in a completely foreign context. And so they would lose their language. They'd lose their identity. Now they're doing it in the reverse, where instead of taking, rednecks, and instead of deporting them to Canada, or I don't know where you deport the rednecks, but instead of moving them, they're moving people into the redneck community as a way of breaking that community. And if you're not integrated into the financial and military and legal structure of the state, you have no defense against that. The Amish have no defense to this. But once you become integrated, as the Mormons have, into the CIA, into the financial structure with Romney and Bain Capital, with the military structure, when you become integrated, then the state says, I don't like you guys, and you guys are kind of a threat, but you're very important to the functioning of the state, and so we can come to an agreement. We can tolerate you. The Janissaries, these Christians who were essentially forced to convert to Islam and serve in the Ottoman military, they provided a function. They provided a usefulness to the state. And so Christian communities were basically, partially, I think the reason they were allowed to persist and weren't just exterminated, they were people of the book, and so they had a relation to the Islamic ideology. And they also, Christian communities provided these soldiers that, for whatever reason, the Ottomans seemed to think they made better soldiers. Not my opinion, that was what the Ottomans thought. And also, you look at the Ottoman leadership, and they were marrying women from Ukraine. And so the children of the Sultan were all effectively Ukrainians. So that's, mate selection is another important thing. The elites, who do they choose among the slave population to mate with? And that's going to influence who they. So being having a people with beautiful women is a successful survival strategy as a minority, not as a majority, but as a minority. What is the result of this recognition? So referring to the recognition, I suppose, of understanding that postmodernism cannot continue. It's an intermediate form. It's not a metaphysics of its own. It's not a return to classical metaphysics, nor is it a return to modernism. And it's not some perfect synthesis of the two. Rather, all of these things exist at once in tandem. This was represented by De Chirico in his portrait of Apollinare, the Greek statue wearing sunglasses. This is from the early 20th century. He's got a Greek statue wearing sunglasses, which is now kind of a meme. But that was the origin of it. We are no longer creating new iconotypes, but we're digging up old ones from the graveyard, dressing them up in new clothes. This is why zombies fascinate us, because we have a zombie culture. That is to say, we take dead things and we reanimate them. This is why every movie must have a sequel and a remake of the sequel and an adaptation of the novel, which is based on the sequel of the remake. So this is the zombie culture that we have, where it's not that we're creating new things, and it's not that we have, we continue what is living, but we are constantly going into the landfill and we're pulling out these old artifacts. Like an archaeologist, we're saying, oh, this is cool. It's basically archaeofuturism. We live, another way to describe zombieism is archaeofuturism. You're taking something old and putting it into a new context, but we're not creating something new. This is really what hypermodernism is. Each artist has their own metaphysics, which is, you just take, I'll take Greek statues and then I'll take sunglasses and I'll smash them together. That's the context that we live in. What does this mean for sociopolitics? I don't use this word metapolitics. I don't think it's a good word. Sociopolitics. The politics of sociality and social groups and social organization. Human cultures exist as scavengers in the trash heap of history. Mad Max is real, and we are in the desert, and the water of life is scarce. So I'm talking about the desert in terms of culture. Like, the culture that we have right now is a desert. It doesn't have power. It doesn't have vitality. And so we're kind of like starving in the desert here, metaphorically. And we're running around in our little gas-guzzling motorcycles and trucks, and we're trying to find this water. It's very scarce. We're trying to get it from somewhere. Those who are able to form determination and focus on what is necessary will survive, while those who are not will get lost in the simulation. This is the new Darwinism of our time. In the jungle, you are alert for the jaguar, for the tripping vine, for the poison fruit. Now we're attacked by our own instincts, by our distractions, by our own passions. We live in a miasma of pure passion where we fight against our own boredom. The hellfire is gone. The French word ennui is one of these pieces of trash, which, if salvaged, can be recognized for its power in describing the fanatic energy which selects the strong from the weak. The strong man is not the one with muscles and intelligence and charisma. The strong man is the one who can direct his attention toward what matters. In a world of illusion, that is a seemingly impossible task. However, if we were in the trenches of war, survival would seem impossible there as well. That something is impossible does not change the fact that it remains necessary. We have no choice but to succeed here or die trying. We live in a society of toxic waste. We inhabit endless ocean of lies where the truth grazes our legs like seaweed and kelp and minnows. Our hands reach out to grasp those colonies of minnows, and they slip through our fingers. The truth is infinite and everywhere and as numerous as the lies. It's not enough to perceive the distinction between that which is true and that which is lie, but to understand what truths are pertinent, which are important, in a higher sense, which truths are true, which are authentic, which are genuine. It's not enough to say the system is based on lies. We also have to acknowledge that the system is based on truth simultaneously. That the lies themselves are based on truth. That the lies themselves are calculated with the truth in mind to produce a desired outcome, so that the lies themselves are closer to the truth than the supposed refutations of these instrumental lies. For example, is feminism good? Well, here comes the right-winger, the strong man, the self-described social Darwinist. He comes with history and biology and all sorts of evidence and rational arguments about how feminism is bad. And what does he have to show for it? At best, he has his wife and kids, for now, barring divorce. What of his children? Does he insulate them from the world and weaken them, depriving them of our new hellfire? Or does he expose them to the world and lose them to feminism? In either case, his arguments have not overcome feminism because he has not recognized what feminism is. Feminism is not a lie. It is not inaccurate. It is not a mistake. Feminism is a predator, like a virus. Feminism is a living creature which exists and is transmitted from host to host through mimetic evolution. Feminism is the lion which makes the gazelle fast and strong and beautiful. When we understand feminism for its function, feminism is no different from the diseases which killed children like smallpox. Feminism is no different from war or starvation or any of those things which the self-professed social Darwinist claims to love as part of natural selection. The self-professed social Darwinist hates feminism because it defeats him. He wishes he was playing a different game. He is not adapted to these new conditions. It is the adaptive and adaptable man who will overcome feminism, not by eradicating it for the majority of the population, but through developing an immune system which can tolerate it. This is the minoritarian strategy. Feminism will eliminate those who cannot adapt and overcome it. This is not a problem of physical strength, of manhood, or of masculinity. There are plenty of bodybuilding peak specimens who will never have children, who will never marry, or they'll make the mistake to get married and then they'll get divorced. This is a problem of mental and spiritual navigation. So the boomer answer, which is, just look them straight in the eye, give them a firm handshake, and, just go up to her and be bold. Be bold with women and just, you got to talk to real women. You got to be confident. These are not real solutions to the problem of feminism. Feminism ultimately has really, the only impact it has, the essence of it is low fertility. And so none of these things address the low fertility problem of feminism. I mean, people can criticize certain communities as being effeminate or not strong or not manly or not masculine. Masculinity is not what creates large families. I mean, what's the definition of Yiddishkeit? Yiddishkeit means you're kind of meek and neurotic and, Woody Allen type. But Orthodox Jews have some of the largest families in America. So the idea that it's like pure you just smash, feminism is like a wall that you smash your hand through. No, you develop an immune system, you develop a tolerance, you develop a membrane that allows you to navigate these waters that are sort of these feminist-infested waters. So it's not about smashing feminism and destroying it and disproving it, but it's about negotiating with it. Ultimately, the warrior wants to go back to fighting wars and winning them. But the war before him is not a physical war, and therefore he cannot win. Still, there is a struggle. Still, there is a challenge. I reject nationalism because a nation cannot survive this challenge. A nation was never intended to survive this challenge. This challenge was intended to wipe out all nations. So, the nation state was invented at a particular time for a particular purpose. The ideology that we have today that we swim in is anti-national. It was created to destroy nationalism. So nationalism, when your enemy attacks you on a certain front, do you dig yourself into that front and say no retreat, or do you do kind of a tactical retreat and then attack from the flank? So the idea of a defending nationalism, when that is the boogeyman of our time, I don't think is the smart strategy. Something greater will survive. Power always fills a vacuum. The greater misery we feel now under the weight of a challenge we did not evolve to survive, the greater we will be to overcome it. So that was a little kind of an essay thing. Now there is sort of a follow-up essay here that I think maybe connects to the feminist aspect, and we're going to take out the hyper-modernity, or we can just throw this into here. Is that going to work? No, because they're not the same. They're not the same thing. Let's see if we can do a window capture on the book. Let's see, book. Okay. And then we're going to do a transformation of this. Edit. Top, we'll do 240. See how that looks. Now, we got to do more than 240. We got to do like 500 on this one. To cut out the top and just get what we need. Okay. So here we go. Mathematical models of population decline. If people want to take a look at some of the data here, if I can figure out how to copy paste, or I don't know if the screen is frozen or what's going on here. But let's take that out and let's put this in. And let's sort of zoom things a little bit. Zoom them so that we have something like this. Something like this might work. All right, I'm trying to post a link here, but everything's very slow. Let's check on the chat. Oh man, that's not what I intended. Internet's very slow right now. I think we're on page 5. Okay, we've got to the place that we want to be. Now, can I just copy paste this? Is it going to allow me to copy paste it? It's very slow today. I don't know what is so slow about this. I need an upgrade. There are currently roughly 8 billion people on the face of the planet. By 2100, this is projected to increase to 14 billion, or that was the high estimate. I think 10 billion is the low estimate. That's barring nuclear war or plague. So we could have nuclear war and plague. That makes it even lower, but I went with the highest estimate I could find, which is 14 million. If you think it's lower, then that is going to be in my favor for the numbers we're going to talk about. But let's assume it's really high at 14 billion. At the same time, fertility in every nation across the world is currently decreasing. Fertility is lowest in urban areas. City-states such as Singapore have especially low fertility. Fertility seems to be approaching 1 or lower. That is, on average, each woman has only 1 child. At this rate, how long will it take for humanity to go extinct? So this is just a fun little question here that's kind of connected with feminism. It's illustrative. It's not meant to be a kind of, oh, this is exactly what's going to happen. This is a prediction of the future. This is just supposed to be a fun little math experiment, little arithmetic for you. First of all, if each woman only has 1 child, the population will decrease by half each generation, assuming a total population of 14 billion. Then a fertility of 1 will reduce the population to 7 billion. Of course, this will not occur instantaneously, since old people who are not reproducing will continue living into their 70s, 80s, 90s, and even longer. So the population will not suddenly drop, but the fertile population will. So here we're going to look specifically at the fertile population as an expression of the total fertile potential of that population, not look at the total population. So I'm not saying that just because people are having less kids that the world population is going to drop to 14 billion to 7 billion in a single generation, but that the population of fertile women is going to drop. By the time a woman hits age 30, she has already produced 90% of all the fertile eggs she'll ever produce in her lifetime. Currently, 33.8% of the population are women under the age of 44. By 2100, only 26.4% of the global population will be women under the age of 44. Thus, there are currently 2.366 billion fertile women in the world, and in 2100, there will be 3.696 billion potentially fertile women in the world. Again, that's a high estimate. Currently we're looking at 33.8, and then we're looking at 26.4. That's a high estimate. It could be lower than that, but let's continue with the high estimate. If those 3.696 billion fertile women only have one child each, there will be 1.848 billion PFW, so potentially fertile women remaining after 40 years. So potentially fertile women refers to all women or girls under the age of 40 who might someday have kids. So we're going to have a reduction in those PFWs from about 3.7 billion down to about 1.8 billion in the course of 40 years. So every 40 years, a new crop of women becomes infertile, and we're left with a certain percentage, or we're left with a certain amount. So by the year 2140, so in 120 years, there's going to be 1.848 billion PFWs in the world. And there are currently 2.366 PFWs in the world in the current year. This will reduce to 924 million by the year 2180 and to 462 million by 2220. For reference, in the year 1950, 39% of the population was PFW, which means that there were 989 million fertile women on the earth in 1950. So by 2220, 200 years from now, there will be less PFW on the earth than there were in 1950. So again, to reiterate, in the year 1950, there were almost 1 billion potentially fertile women on the planet Earth. By the year 2220, there's going to be less fertile women on the planet Earth than there were in 1950. Now, that being said, I'm not saying there's going to be less people in total, because there's going to be a lot of old people who are around on life support and whatnot. But what it's saying is that the fertile population of women on the planet is decreasing. Ultimately, it's going to, by 200 years from now, it's going to be less than it was in 1950. We're going to see population decline. By 2260, there will only be 231 million PFW. By 2300, there will be 115.5 million PFW. For reference, by the end of the 19th century, there were 1 billion people on Earth, if roughly 39% of those 1 billion were PFW. So out of all the men and the old people and the young people and everybody, if roughly 39% of the population was potentially fertile women, there were roughly 390 million PFW in 1899. A century prior, in 1700, there were only 234 million PFW, and in 1600, there were only 195 million PFW. If you go back to 1500, there were 167.7 million PFW, and in 1400, there were 136.5 million PFW. So, again, by the year 2300, which is only 280 years away, there's going to be less potentially fertile women on the planet Earth than there were 600 years ago, which is pretty incredible to think about. The shift that in 300 years, we're going to have less potentially fertile women than we had 600 years ago. So this is a rapid decline. In the year 1000, at the height of the Christianization process of Europe, there were at most 310 million people in the world, and likely 120.9 million PFW. Population estimates for the preceding 10 centuries suggest that there were between 150 million and 310 million people living on the earth at any given time. At the lowest point, there would have been only 58.5 million PFW on earth following the birth of Christ. So 2,000 years ago, there were 58 million PFW. In the year 2340, there will only be 57.75 million PFW on the planet Earth, which would be the lowest number for the last 2,340 years. So what I'm saying is, in 320 years, we're going to have less PFW, less potentially fertile women on the planet Earth than we had 2,340 years ago, around the birth of Christ. There will be more potentially fertile women during the time of Christ than there will be in 320 years. So this is pretty rapid population decline if we assume that fertility is going to converge on 1. It could even go lower than 1, or it could stay higher, but this is the mathematical experiment. In the year 1000 or 100 BC, or excuse me, 1000 BC, you can tell too many numbers here. During the time of the Trojan Wars, there were at least 50 million people on the Earth and at least 19.5 million PFW. In the year 2380, there will be 28.9 million PFW on Earth, and in 2420, there will be 14.4 million PFW on Earth. Thus, there will be less PFW on Earth in the year 2420 than there were during the Trojan War, which will be the smallest population of PFW in 3,420 years. So this is crazy. This means in 400 years, there's going to be less PFW, less potentially fertile women than there were during the Trojan War, which is like ancient times. It's like during, before Homer. In the year 2000 BC, ancient Egypt and Babylonia were in decline, and the ancient Indian Vedas were beginning to be written. During this time, the global population was 27 million, and there were 10.53 million PFW. In the year 2460, there will only be 7.2 million PFW in the world, which will represent the lowest number of PFW on the Earth for 4,460 years. So again, I know 400 years sounds like a long time to you, but if you look at history, 4,000 years ago, we're going to have more people, more potentially fertile women on the planet Earth 4,460 years ago than we will have in the next 440 years. So do you see how the time scales are going here? In the year 3000 BC, ancient Egypt and Babylonia were at their height, and the Indo-Europeans were invading Ireland and China and Bangladesh at this time. Global population was 14 million. So very small global population, 14 million. That's like what, New York City or something? 14 million people, very small. And there were 5.46 million PFWs on the whole planet. In the year 2300, and did I get my math right here? Let's check our math. I think we mean 2500, right? I think I was off. Well, that's why we check, right? But in the year 2500, there will be only 3.6 million PFWs on Earth, which will be the lowest PFW population for 5,300 years. So literally, in the next 500 years, there's going to be less PFWs, less potentially fertile women, on the planet Earth in 500 years, if we converge on a fertility of 1. It's going to be less people on the Earth in 500 years than there were 5,000 years ago. Egypt and Babylonia, that ancient world, had more potentially fertile women walking the Earth than there will be, 500 years from now. So I got to check my my math here because I'm off by 200. Make that amendment there. In the year 4000 BC, Europe was dominated by the ancestors of the Basque, Etruscan, and Finno-Ugric peoples, while the Middle East was beginning to be settled by West Asian people known as Sumerians. At this time, there were only 7 million people in the world and only 2.76 million PFWs, so kind of a small city there. In the year 2540, there will only be 1.8 million PFWs in the world, which will be the lowest count for a period of 6,340 years. And that's 520 years from now. The year 5000 BC was a time before the Garden of Eden, before Adam, which the Jews believe existed before the creation of the world. Historically, this was a period prior to the evolution of the Indo-European language, when humans began to paint cave paintings in Australia. The oldest calendars in the world, such as the Egyptian and Assyrian, begin after this millennia. So this is like prehistory to the ancients. Like the ancients, when they talked about the beginning of the world, except for the Hindus thought it was old, the Chinese thought it was old. But in the West, in Egypt, in Sumeria, the Jews and so on, they thought 5000 BC was before the beginning of the world. It was so old to them. They couldn't even consider it because, of course, it was before their time, before their civilizations. Still, there were at least 5 million people in the world at this time and at least 1.95 million PFWs. By 2380, there will only be about 900,000 PFWs in the world, which would be the lowest point for humanity in 7,380 years. Make sure I have my math right there. And 2,580. And I probably have to change this one too, right? 7,000. Okay, let's go back up and change this one then to 5, and then we got to change this one. Do we have to change this one, or is this one good? I think that one's good. I think we only have to change those two. Sorry for the math error, everybody. No, we got to change this one as well. We got to change that 3 to a 5. Okay. I think we've got all the ones in the past. Now we got to change this one to be... We got to change this one to be 6. And this one to be 6. I'm off by 200. And we got to change this one to be 6. Okay. 12,000 years ago, in the year 10,000 BC, there may have only been 1 million people in the world. Very small city. This was the dawn of agriculture, of cities, and of urbanism. At this time, there were an estimated 390,000 PFWs in the world. In the year 2620, there will only be 450,000 PFWs in the world. In the year 2660, there will only be 225,000 PFWs in the world. Thus, this will be the lowest number of PFWs in 12,660 years of human history. So, 600 years in the future, we're going to have the lowest PFW population of the last 12,000 years of human history. So it'll be at 12,000. That'll be the lowest point we've ever had since we invented agriculture in the next 600 years. Prior to the year 10,000 BC, it's difficult to find estimates for human population. However, for comparison, there are roughly 300,000 chimpanzees in the world today. According to Discover magazine, when Homo sapiens entered into Europe, they outnumbered Neanderthals by 10 to 1, and there were roughly 10,000 Neanderthals in Europe at that time. Therefore, we can reasonably say that there were 100,000 humans in Europe, Asia, Africa, and elsewhere 40,000 years ago, adding up to maybe 50,000 in total with a PFW of 195,000. If we assume an average between 10,000 BC and 40,000 BC, then the human population in 25,000 BC was roughly 750,000 with 292,000 PFWs. Thus, the PFW of 225,000 in 2460, which I should amend to be 2660, will likely be the lowest it has ever been for 27,000 years. We can just keep that like that. In the year, we got to add 200. In the year 2700, there will be 112,000, not million. Excuse me. I made some errors here. And it's hard to amend them because the internet's laggy. There'll be 112,000 PFWs. This will be lower than the PFW of 195,000, which humanity achieved 50,000 years or 40,000 years ago. So humanity will be at the lowest point in 42,000 years. Then we scroll down. Homo sapiens emerged as a discernible and distinct species in the fossil record about 200,000 years ago. At this time, their population was only 10,000, with a PFW of 3,900. That represents 3,900 potentially fertile women in the human population 200,000 years ago. Projecting into the future, in 2740, there will be 56,000 PFWs. Then in 2780, there will be 28,000 PFWs. And in 2620, which should be 2820, there will be 14,000 PFWs. By 2820, didn't I just do 2820? Should be 2860, shouldn't it? Sloppy in the math here. By 2860, there will only be 7,000 PFWs. Finally, by 28, and this should be, I guess, 2920, there will be only 3,000 PFWs. This means that it shouldn't be 600, it should be 900 years. The number of PFWs on Earth will be smaller than the number of PFWs which existed on Earth 200,000 years ago. This will be the lowest number of PFWs in existence since the birth of the human species. So that's pretty incredible. In the next 900 years, if feminism continues, we're going to have fewer PFWs, potentially fertile women, than we had 200,000 years ago at the birth of the Homo sapiens species. In the year, so now we've got to make sure this is correct. In the year 2960, I think it should be. In the year 2960, there will only be 881 PFWs on the planet Earth. Is that correct? I think I need to make this the year 3000. Because I made it first 50. Yeah, this is the year 3000. In the year 3000, man, I'm not as prepared as I thought I was. I thought this was a polished essay. In the year 3000, there will be only 881 PFWs on the planet Earth. In the year 2820, there will only be, and that should be, what should that be? 340. In the year 3040, there will only be, no, we should add another, because I'm skipping by 2 generations now. In the year 3080, there will only be 220 PFWs left on Earth, which means they will likely all know each other and could live together in a small village. In the year, what is this going to be? 320? 320, and then add another one. So in the year 3160, there will only be 55 PFWs left. And at this point, the human population will be small enough that inbreeding will be unavoidable. By the year, how much do we add here? From 31, that would be 32. In the year 3200, there will only be 28 PFWs, which could fit into a small classroom. Mass shootings often exceed this number, and so humanity would not just be threatened by incest, but also potential terrorist attacks. By the year, what'll this be? This will be 3240. In the year 3240, there will be 14 PFWs left, meaning that men will begin to rank women out of 14 rather than out of 10. In the year, what is this? 3260. Or no, this would be just 3300. There will be 7 PFWs left who will all be members of the same incestuous family. By the year, what is this going to be? 3340. There will only be 3 PFWs left, assuming, assuming that everybody has 50% male, 50% female children. You're going to have 3 PFWs left. Now, if everybody has female children, that would be a different story. If we start to value female children, then maybe that would be a different story. We could select for that. Maybe that's a solution. Maybe the solution is that we select for females in our children. Unlike China, the Chinese, they just want male, they want sons. But if we start selecting for females and we start saying, we're only going to have female children, then maybe that's the solution to feminism. Maybe that'll solve this problem. But if there are only 3 PFWs, we could assume that they'd be composed of a blonde, brunette, and redhead. By the year, this would be 3400. I'm off by several hundred years here. By the year 3400, there will only be 1 PFW left to have the last family on Earth. However, by the year, what would this be? 3440, her daughter will have no partner with which to continue the human species besides her father. This father-daughter incest might continue for a few generations, but ultimately inbreeding depression will likely lead to a genetic deformity, which leads to infertility. Thus, in the next, what is this going to be? This is 1,320 years. If humanity does not rebound from 1 child per woman, humanity will go extinct. Or, we're going to have to start selecting. We will have to do gender selection to have all female children. Much like the structure of an ant colony or bee hive. So that's just a little fun math there. I thought that was fun. I thought that was cool. You might disagree, and that's okay. And it certainly wasn't as good as the first essay. Math is kind of lame and stupid. And words are fun and interesting. So let's see what the comments had to say. Religion, I don't think, let's see, could be abstracted, loving the female. This will get you clicks. The new identity is online. Mine's creating the identity. People identify with anonymous Twitter mutuals. Live streams, personalities, memes, very globalistic. How the left is very traditional, real life manifestations, LARPing like it's the 60s, slogans and chants. I got myself a haircut. I got it tight on the sides. The right wore clown suits. Everyone was streaming. Everything was informed by absurdist meme culture. He walked into the bar. Actually, I walked into myself. That's what I did. Pete, are you saying that the right online movement is analogous to the left 60s? I would say no, because the 60s had elite backers, whereas the right does not. Friendship with Jesus Christ is over. John Locke is my new best friend. Well, John Locke was a Christian, so I give credit where his credit is due, but I think it is controversial in the very least. I think at least traditional Christians would reject what I'm saying, but maybe there's some liberal, maybe John Locke would, maybe he would enjoy it. I mean, he was a Freemason, right? So he'd probably be into it. I mean, Freemasonry in a way is what I'm talking about. I'm basically advocating for Freemasonry if you read in between the lines. The left is LARPing as the 60s, being trad, wearing boots and buttons. The right wears clown shoots, shields, real life streaming, spouting memes. I don't think LARPing like it's the 60s is trad in any meaningful way. Definitely outdated, but probably because the activist left is largely comprised of Woodstock retirees. Do you think Joseph Smith was deliberate in how he developed the Mormon religion as a way to sacralize America for the European colonizers, or it gained traction because he did those things? I don't know. So they're both a hypothesis you could run with, but maybe it was both. Islamic high art is actually poetry and calligraphy. Visual art is very Eurocentric. What about mosque art? Architecture patterns and geometry as well are less important. Saeed Hossein Nasir had a talk where he mentions and titles religion, metaphysics, philosophy, Sufism, and art an introduction. I think he cites Titus Burckhardt. Guy wrote a lot about sacred arts. Hello? That's not cool, Michael. You can't time people out for that. Where are you, Michael? You just lost your mod status. You can't time people out for saying hello. I'm sorry, William. The mods are going crazy in the chat. They're mad with power. We should set up a GoFundMe for Amish legal fees. Well, ultimately, I don't think that's going to work. I think ultimately people don't care about the Amish. People like the idea. Like, I like the idea, but am I going to spend a bunch of money defending them? I mean, it's a cynical thing to say. It's a sad thing to say. I just think objectively they're not going to garner the support that they need. The support's going to have to come from within. So that's why I say you need to be techno-Amish. You need to go beyond the Amish. You need to be integrated into the system in some way. Because the only people who are going to defend your community is your community. You can't rely on outside communities to defend you. That's how you die. My earliest experience with politics was probably when my teacher showed me that toilet art. I just couldn't see how it was art. 40 years later, and artists are still rehashing this shocking concept. Now it's a banana instead of a toilet. I grew up in postmodernism. Meta-contrarianism, post-irony, new sincerity, postmodernism, sincerity derived from irony, trends within art criticism, everyone in the art scene in the way of fancy pants galleries is trying to appeal to postmodern theories of art informing criticism, informing art. Sex education will be like physical education. Okay, everybody partner up. I was thinking about that today, and I was thinking, sex education, I understand it destroys the mysticism of sex and probably reduces some of the the power of sexuality. But maybe that's a liberal approach. And, I think I could run a pretty good sex education course. I think I could scare the kids straight. I think I could be like, hey, look, if you have sex, here's pictures of what your genitalia are going to look like when you get an STD. Here's a picture of an old person who committed suicide because they didn't have kids. Here's some data showing that if you have casual sex, you're not going to have a stable family. Here's a picture of a guy who committed suicide because he got divorced and his wife took everything. Here's a chart showing how, the more casual sex you have, the more likely you are to get divorced. So I would just show them a lot of like dead bodies and disfigured genitalia to like these little kids, and I'd be like, here's what happens if you have casual sex. I think it would be a very effective program, but of course they're not gonna. Of course, if I do that, I'm a bad guy. Of course, if I do that, oh, you're scarring the children. Don't show the children. No, please think of the children. It's like, you people, you're funny, aren't you? You're funny. It's okay to be like, yeah, kids, do whatever you want. Let's teach you how to get as many, just wear a condom, do whatever you want. It's totally whatever. Just whatever you're feeling, whatever you see on TV, whatever you watch in porn, it's all okay. It's all good. That's okay. That's fine. But I come along and I have some pictures of some people who have committed suicide. I have some pictures of like genital warts and diseases and infections. And all of a sudden it's, think about the children. Don't scar the children. Protect the children. So it's a thing, right? It's a thing. But I think if you follow this curriculum, I think you could have an excellent sex ed education program. I think sex ed is a great idea. I think we just need to be more honest with the kids. Honestly, I think you could have a very effective sex ed education program if you were just honest with the kids. Say, look, if you watch porn, you're likely to fail at life. Here's what's going to happen to your dopamine levels. Here's a picture of a guy who killed himself from watching too much porn. We're going to compare people who watch porn, don't. Here's your, we just lay the facts out on the table with all this stuff. And I think you could scare kids straight so easily. I think it would be effective. I think it would be positive. I don't mind. Look, if showing them some gore posts from 4chan is going to scare them straight, then I'm for it. I'm 100% in favor of sex education. But people don't want to do that. People, think of the children, protect the children. No, we can only, let them watch, sterilized pornography, this fake whatever, that's okay. Kids should watch porn, but no, we shouldn't show them like the consequences of any of that. So there's a lot to explore there. There's a lot of fun times that could be had. But of course, that's not allowed. Of course, you could never show children like, here's a picture of somebody who committed suicide, because that's like too real. Kids can't handle that. Oh, but they can cut off their genitalia and inject hormones and, and then, we know, we know. And that's okay. And that's fine. And I'm happy about that. And that's the way it should be, right? So it's pretty amazing. It's a wonderful thing. That's the future. In the future, I will go to jail for saying these things, but that's okay, because you'll learn from my mistake. And you guys out there, you're not going to jail. You guys are going to be successful. You guys are going to learn from my mistakes, and you're going to become the new minoritarian stewards of, I don't know, liberalism or post-liberalism or whatever it is. I don't know. We don't like you for being something, but you serve as the animating foe for liberalism, so we'll keep you around. I dislike Kenneth only taking up half of the screen. Well, I just like to show little graphics. I think it zazzes things up. Am I muted? Are we gonna make it, brah? You're only gonna make it if you follow my strategy. Otherwise, you're gonna die. You can't even do what I do. Making a live stream is not gonna save you. You need to be minoritarian, and we're gonna explain what that means. I'm gonna talk about the theory. But yeah, you need to not provoke the system into destroying you. You shouldn't wave your hand and be like, "Hey system, I don't believe what you say and I hate you. And if I had the chance, if I had power, I would destroy you." What do you think the system's going to do? Done, banned, imprisoned, dead. What do you think the system's going to do if you're a threat? What did they do to Epstein? So, if you stick out like a sore thumb and you're like, "Hey system, come kill me," you're probably going to get killed. So I don't suggest doing that. I don't suggest going out there. I think really there are people who are going to have to say things which are, contrarian. But I think the people who do that should be the best of the best, like the best communicators. I'm doing this just because I like it. This is me saying I enjoy this too much to. I mean, like the dopamine, I guess, that I receive from making videos is too much to counteract the fact that it's a stupid strategic thing to do. But other people who are not really good at making videos should not. Certainly, no one should be provoking the system. Um, Period. I just don't think that's a good strategy. You shouldn't be the idea of having a protest is just so dumb. Like anybody who's ever been part of a protest, I think automatically like banned from life from the smart people department. I think if you've ever participated in a protest, I think you have to just you got to go hang out with the not so smart people, okay? And I don't think anyone should really ever take you seriously or listen to anything you say if you ever have been involved in a protest or you think that kind of action is okay or smart or whatever. So that's kind of my opinion on that sort of thing. And there's a lot of other behaviors that are just so stupid from a cost benefit analysis. I mean, I like making I mean, I get like again, you could make the argument that what I'm doing is hypocritical, whatever. I'm a hypocrite. I admit that every day, all the time. I'm the worst hypocrite in the world. I'm like the champion. If there was a competition, I would win it. But still, I think I say some things that are true, and I think you could learn from what I have to say. So, if we could get the 28 viewers and 18 likes, if we could get that up a little bit, I'd really appreciate that. What if what matters is having big muscles because I need to hit the gym and Ken is distracting me? Big muscles only help you to the extent that I think people view you as a bigger authority if you have big muscles. But in themselves, they don't do anything. Big muscles don't matter unless you show them off. So, I think, I don't know, if your journey in life, if your purpose in life is like you're trying to have a good job or write a book or like be successful in politics, like big muscles are not really, it's not to say being like you can be athletic, you can be strong, you can be fit, but big muscles specifically, like bodybuilding specifically, like weightlifting specifically, is that a good idea? I think the arguments I make in the essay kind of contradict that, right? So I'm sort of anti big muscles. I don't think people should really focus on having big muscles. That said, if your hobby is bodybuilding, if you like it, it's not necessarily counterproductive. It's just not going to, like a society of bodybuilders is not going to win a political struggle. It's guys like John Locke. You look at John Locke, he has asthma. He's a very he's almost starving. He's so thin and frail and whatever. But that's where power is. Buddha was not a fat guy. The Chinese think he was fat. Buddha was actually skinny. So Christ was not big and fat. He didn't have big muscles. He was fit. He was athletic. He was a carpenter. But Christ was kind of this, he was an endomorph, right? So I believe that endomorphs shall inherit the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. Physically weak people will inherit the earth. And these guys with big muscles, they're going to get banned. They're going to get banned. And I don't care how big your muscles are. If the state comes and a drone shoots you, or you get tased or whatever, I don't care how big your muscles are. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help. The future is going to be nerdy programmers who look like John Locke, creating drones, autonomous drones, and that's the future of warfare. So big muscles, that's so like 10,000 BC. Like that is so, we are so long past the point where big muscles are important, except if you want social approval. If you want women to approve of you, and you want men to respect you and to fear you and whatever, if you want an interpersonal authority and whatever, big muscles can help you with that. But in terms of, power in the world and politics and things like that, big muscles are a big distraction. But a lot of things are distractions. Some people play video games, people are watching porn, people are doing drugs. There are all kinds of distractions in the world. And it's like, at some point, it's like, who has the hyper focus to be doing the productive thing all the time? Certainly not me. And I encourage that. And I encourage people to be focused. And I encourage people to become good at things which are a productive use of their time so that they develop those good habits. So I encourage good habits, but at the same time, it's like if you're going to waste your time, if you're going to do something that's just for fun, then, getting big muscles is not the worst use of your time, but it's just you're not going to like save the West with big muscles. And people who claim like you're going to save the West with big muscles, I'm not sure they're using their brains. All for it's leg day for me. I'll clip this. I'm going to deadlift, which has a little leg action. Soy boy PhDs have more white kids than you. That is, the statistics do prove that to be correct, that on average, men with PhDs who are leftist communists have more children than like your average working class professional blue collar guy. What is your ultimate goal? What kind of future do you want? I'm a theorist. He didn't lay that out here, a minoritarian strategy. The ultimate goal, I think first you have to find out who you are, what your identity is, who your people are. Like I said, white people are not my people. I don't look at white people and I'm like, oh, hello, brother. Ah, yes, brother. So good to see a fellow white man. I suppose there are people in this country who think that's like a legitimate idea or concept or like political strategy. I don't feel that like on a personal level. Now, if I was living in Africa or Asia or somewhere where whites were a very small minority, or even like I was living in an area where like less than 1% of people were white, I probably would look at white people and be like, oh man, we're kind of similar. And so I think there's a case to be made that as the white population declines, the concept of whiteness is going to have more positive meaning to it. At this point, when we're talking about a country that's like 60% white, or, if you subtract Muslims and Jews, I guess it's 56% white, because they're about 2% of the population each, respectively. If you say it's 56% white, I just don't think that's at a level where whiteness is a positive identity concept. So I think we first have to ask, who are we? What are our ideals? What do we want? That's the question, right? And if I had that figured out, I would be telling you, join the blank. If I was to say, I want a Christian future, I'd say join the Christians. If I wanted a Jewish or Muslim future, I'd say join the Jews or Muslims. And I would say my goal is to spread Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Right now, what I'm saying is there has to be something that integrates liberalism and science into Christianity. And that is going to be the new religion of the West. And I think that's going to have to be adopted in a minoritarian way. And so that's what I'm promoting. I mean, the future that I want is that out of the masses of the people, out of the majorities, out of the society, that we, those of us who kind of can see the big picture here and who care about the big picture, that we can come together and say, hey, look, we see that if you're just an individual, you're going to get destroyed. We also see that just being a racist is not a solution. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to retread those steps, but I think just being a racist is not a solution. So what is the solution? I mean, again, I think it looks something like either Freemasonry or Christianity plus science and liberalism, or it looks like Mormonism. And none of these things exactly get at what the optimal strategy is, but kind of working toward that and moving toward that and experimenting with different things. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. That's kind of what I'm looking at. But there's a lot of criticism, and there's a lot of like, but what about this and what about that? And so there's a lot of stuff that you have to kind of dig into and figure out in the process, and it's not all entirely clear. So there's a lot of confusion here. So you have to figure out your theory and then your dogma, and then once you have that, then you start promoting it. You form hierarchies, you form organizations. I mean, I'm personally, as an individual, I'm not in a position to lead people because, like I said, I'm not like the stellar. There's a certain personality type that you need to be a leader. And I don't have that. I'm not like the best at like organizing people and being the ideal. Like, I wouldn't say to anybody, oh, just take my life and just copy paste what I do and apply it to your own life. There are people who are either moral leaders or organizational leaders that ultimately are going to have to emerge. But I'm trying to look at the scaffolding of what are the really important elements that you need to integrate. Of like, here's a dead end, like you can't just be Amish, or like here's a dead end, like you can't just be Christian, like we need something more than that. So kind of pointing people in that direction, and then hoping someone who is a leader type picks up on the points that I'm laying down, whether directly from me or if it's disseminated into a wider subculture on the internet, ultimately takes those points, recognizes the truth and legitimacy of them, integrates it into their own strategy, their own plan, and whatever, and then something comes out of that. So I'm not looking to be the be and end all of like I lead the revolution, but I'm kind of like a theorist. I'm kind of like, you know, in the same way that like Marx wasn't necessarily like in the streets, or he wasn't necessarily like organizing the Communist Party, but his big contribution was he was like writing theory, and that theory ultimately provided like the springboard for dogma and for ideology and like organization and leadership. And ultimately, like, communism itself sort of grew out of that in a weird, contradictory way. Like, I don't expect the implementation of my ideas to be faithful. I don't expect someone to, like, read an essay of mine and to be like, oh, I know exactly what to do. But I'm kind of pointing towards something and creating kind of a Hegelian, like, we have a thesis, antithesis. Like, I'm providing the antithesis, and I think the way that that plays out in history is going to look a lot different. I don't know if I can predict that successfully, but I'm kind of pushing energies in that way so that people can stop thinking in a majoritarian fashion of like, oh, we have to destroy feminism, or, you know, everyone has to be the same. We all have to be Christian, like society, like we have to go back to, you know, something like that. I think pushing people in a minoritarian direction is the first and foremost thing I'm trying to do. And what that looks like exactly, or how that's implemented, I don't really know. But I'm kind of making these big picture arguments that are not logistical in nature, and hoping that someone who is good at logistics sort of picks them up and starts implementing them at some point. And again, I don't know if this is going to be decades or centuries in the future, when all these trends I'm pointing out are really going to play themselves out, and people are going to see that I'm right. So I don't know if I'm, you know, I could die tomorrow, or I could die in 50 years or 100 years with technology. I don't know when I'm going to die, but it might be not until after my death that anything I ever did was relevant. Or, you know, I could just be totally wrong about everything, and everything I ever said and did was totally a waste of time, and I just die for no reason, and it was all for nothing. And, you know, that's always a possibility too. But of course, we're striving toward something different. We're striving, you know, that's the goal. As much as I have not been perfect, and I continue to be imperfect, and you know, it's something you can sort of endlessly dissect and say, oh, well, I'm not good enough, and I'm not doing this good enough, and that. And it's like, I give advice that I don't know. I preach something different from what I practice. That's just part of my philosophy, that it's better to be a hypocrite than someone who embraces your own flaws. But I think ultimately, you know, we strive for recognition, recognize the situation, and then we act in such a way that sort of takes stock of the situation. Whereas I just see a lot of people who are like, we need to act now, we need to do something now, but they're starting from premises that are just really wrong. So I'm trying to point out the flaws in those premises so that maybe we can move forward. Because under false premises, I don't think you're going to get where you think you're going to get. I think you're going to be a boogeyman. I think you're going to be a scarecrow. I think you're going to be a punching bag for a totalitarian state. I don't think you're going to be effective. So let's see. I will have 3 kids. We're going to scroll up. Liking the haircut. Thank you, George. Always changes the direction he combs his hair. Very astute. Brian's been watching my hair for many years. He is a hair expert. I think Brian should start cutting hair. I think he should become a hairdresser. I would let Brian cut my hair. That would be a good video. Brian can come over. He can give me a haircut, you know, and I can talk to him about my personal problems, and he can be like, you know, perfect. It'll be a perfect hairdresser. What do you call the person who's getting their hair cut? I guess the customer. It'll be a perfect hairdresser customer situation. Classic barbershop. Brian will set him up with his own shop. We'll start a GoFundMe page. You'll have that little spinning twirly thing outside of it. I can see it in my head here. I'm liking this mental picture. I'd like to see research about the relationship between hairstyle variability and neuroticism. It's probably high. It's probably high. You know, people who have the same hairstyle all the time, all their lives, probably very stable people. Probably like rock solid. You should trust them, morally competent. People who are switching the direction of the hair all the time, can't trust them. No good. So just another reason to be skeptical, right? PFWs, POWs, children of men, future soon. The movie Taxi Driver represents this relationship. His hair gets progressively shorter with each step into madness. Minoritarian strategy for who and why? For you, and because otherwise you will die. So no matter who you are, Jew, Muslim, Christian, atheist, pagan, you've got to be a minoritarian. The majoritarian strategy will no longer work because of the cultural metaphysics of hypermodernity, or you could say the cultural physics, if you don't like that term, metaphysics, because, well, that's a specific philosophical term that has a specific definition. You know, I understand John David Ebert might not be the best philosopher. Maybe he never read Plato, or, you know, maybe he never read John Locke, but I think his cultural analysis, his analysis of art, is very good, and that's why I reference him. Until it eventually becomes a post-apocalyptic Desert Raiders mohawk, I expect Ken to adopt such a hairstyle soon. Well, look, if the coronavirus starts killing millions in America, I might have to do that. I might have to get a mohawk. But, you know, my hair is kind of like a thermometer of the situation. It's kind of like a thermometer of what's going on in the world. If I have a mohawk, you know times are tough. You know, if I kind of let the hair grow out, it's kind of chill, it's relaxed. So whenever I cut the hair, it sort of represents, it's like a recession, a cultural recession. Something has happened. We haven't even talked about Iowa. We haven't even talked. I mean, does anyone care? Does anyone care about Iowa? Do people care about the fact that like the whole spectacle of it? Like, oh my gosh, we don't have the results instantly. It's like, can you wait a day or two? Like they have to count the votes or whatever. I mean, the whole concept of a caucus is, I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous. That from every angle you look at it, it's ridiculous. But I thought it was more fun to read an essay. I thought the caucus, we could just spin our wheels. We could go around the caucus carousel all night, but I thought we'd read an essay. Ridiculous extrapolation of fertility. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But it was fun. I thought it was fun. He'll go to zero. Ken tracking fertility all the way back to Atlantis. Yeah, very true. Imagine all the billions of PFM fighting for 7 million PFW. Oh yeah. That thumbnail though. Yeah, it's a fancy little thumbnail. What will happen? Will they be captive? Who knows what will happen to the PFW? I can't read those, Pete. They will do battle with the armies of white knights, tips Fedora. The population of men will also decrease, you know. One women with millions of orbiters. Automated high-tech underground high IQ artificial womb secret society will outcompete them. Very true. Man can and do pursue sexual relationships with infertile women. So true. This is so... Why would you say that, Pete? Pete, my friends, just please, cool your jets. Man, when are we gonna finish the Quran, huh? We haven't had as much time recently to finish the Quran. Someday we will. Someday we will be a Quran reading machine. Okay, it's gonna be amazing, but I gotta figure out a situation where I can just wake up in the morning and read the Quran. I got to figure it out. Once you guys just start tithing to the channel, that's when we can do that. So we'll see. That when there are only 3 PFWs, then women will be rated using the Michelin star system. Very funny. Wouldn't everyone be... I can't read that. I think that was an attempt at humor, pre-irony. Little sneaky joke in there. Yeah, a little cheeky joke. It was fun to Kenneth because he got to insert corny jokes. Yeah, it was very fun. How did you develop your style? Well, I went to style school and I read books on style and I used that abstract knowledge and I applied it in a methodological way. And I said, well, here's principle A, B, C of style. I'm going to apply those vigorously and habitually throughout my life. That's how I developed. I thought the fertility essay had a lot of satirical value because it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, it's kind of like a modest proposal or something. Do you work as a waging the day? What do you do for a living? Please share. We want to know more about you. All right. Well, you can go to D Live and you can pay me money, and I will share my autobiography and tell you my life story for let's see, how much would that be? 10,000 lemons or something. We'll answer some personal questions for 10,000 lemons over on D Live. Ken writes philosophy under a Slovenian pseudonym. Gith Brinsky. Yeah, that's a pretty good name. I wish that was my name. If evil and pure lying was distilled in human form as 100% purity, it would be the Chi-Coms according to the internet. Evil, lying, pure evil, so bad, so evil, fake lying. Okay. I guess we're making fun of people who make fun of the Chinese or something. Yeah, I mean, look, basic point. There's no society on earth that can have more lies than truth. Because if you have more lies than truth, effectively, language is meaningless. Or the lies flip around, and if you have, like, if I say, well, the sky is green, the grass is blue, and it's hot when it's cold, and it's yes when it's no, the people are just going to start inverting everything that you're saying to come out to the truth. So it's literally impossible to have a society with more lies than truth. I mean, like, in China, like, what's the daily conversations? It's like, hello, I'm going to work. Okay, this is food. And, like, there's just so much information that's being transmitted that is true. Now, on, like, some cultural, philosophical, political level, yeah, there might be some deception going on. But, I mean, China is a functional society. A functional society has to be based on some truth. Like, it can't be, like, you can't have a functional society and at the same time, like, everything is topsy-turvy. Like, lies basically kill themselves. Lies that are functional are really not lies at all. And actually, they're sort of, you could call it informational manipulation, which I think is different from a lie. I think, again, a lie would be something like the sky is green and the grass is blue. That would be a lie. There's no productive value to me saying that except as an example in the sentence. In that sense, it's instrumental. Similarly, if I say something like, you know, I can't really give you a good example here for reasons, but let's say I said something that was a lie. There's ultimately a purpose behind that lie. So it's not really the same thing as just saying something false for no reason, but there's like an instrumental purpose behind the deception that makes it useful to a certain class of people, not to everyone, but to a class of people. I guess you could say that's still a lie, but I think there's a distinction between lies that are functional for a minority class and then lies that are just like absurd, wrong stuff. There, you know, so there's a distinction there. Go to the mountaintop, scream about how evil, lying, and fake. I don't understand. Are you just venting? Have Westerners been yelling at you all day and you're venting here? Why are they attacking the Amish when they aren't a threat to the power structure? Well, they're a potential threat and they're a soft target. So it's like, why not attack them? Why not attack them? It's like, why did they attack Harvey Weinstein? Like, what did he do wrong? He made Hollywood movies promoting feminism. So why did they attack him? Well, because they could. Because they could, you know? So I think the why here is not so much important. It's just that they are. The objective fact is they are and they will. If you are not powerful, you will be destroyed. Like, it's not a question of like, but I didn't do anything. But I was a good libertarian and I lived on my farm and I didn't hurt anybody. They're gonna kill you. Like, everybody's going to be killed. Like, that's what feminism does, is it tells everybody, like, you're worthless, you're a sack of cells, essentially. You know, a baby is a clump of cells, and therefore we're all just clumps of cells, and therefore nothing matters, and you basically just kill yourself. I mean, that's basically distilled sort of the message there. And so everyone's under attack. Everyone's under attack. Unless you develop an immune system to this sort of thing, you're not going to survive. They're not like, it's not like they're choosing targets like strategically, like, oh, we should invest this much cultural resources in attacking this group because we're gonna get like X like result out of that. Like by attacking the Amish, like we'll earn this much money or something. It's not this kind of mechanistic calculation that's going on. There's not like this analytical process. It's this general like spirit of like almost like a Nietzschean or Socratic dissolving force that just wants to attack everything. And so if you don't have the power and the immune system to respond or defend yourself from that, you're going to be destroyed. Kenneth needs more swag for aesthetics. If you want to buy me something on Amazon, send me some lemons and then send me an Amazon link and I'll buy some swag, but you got to send me the money. Kenneth's gone mad with power. Yeah, I am pretty mad with my 25 viewers and 23 likes. It's kind of a lot of power, kind of a lot of influence I have. I mean, I might not have thousands of viewers and thousands of likes, but we're like 10 to 100. We're like 1% of the way there, which is pretty significant. Basically, by tomorrow, I'll be up there with the best. He needs a diamond grill with Jockle engraved in the upper incisors. You know, I will go ahead and buy. If you provide the money, I'll make the purchase. What's with the Fuentes style commentary? We don't want Fuentes. We want Kenny B's idiosyncratic style. What is it? What do I stop doing? What is it? What does it mean? I read an essay. Does Nick write 5-page essays and read them on his show? Does he give like ridiculous, like long-winded speeches about random stuff? Is that what he does? I mean, if that's what he does, then I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know what you want me to do here. What kind of style do you want? Do you want me to be like quiet and like have a monotone voice? Like, would this be the proper style? I'm just feeling excited today. I'm just loving life today. In this moment, I'm euphoric. And you're not going to get me down by like, oh, you know that the most popular political live streamer on the right wing on YouTube? Yeah, you're exactly like him. Okay. All right. I don't know what to tell you. Be a little more specific. And then I can try to distance myself and create something more idiosyncratic. But I don't even know what you mean. I don't know what people mean at this point if they say, oh, you're just like, I don't know how many times I've heard this. And it's always this amorphous thing. Oh, you're just like Nick because you both live stream on YouTube. Okay, do you have anything substantial besides, I'm watching a live stream on YouTube. I feel like these two people are the same people. You're going to have to give me a little bit more than that. Is liberalism reviving the Sumerian cult of sexual misfits, hermaphrodites, eunuchs, sacred prostitution aside? Possible. Is Joe Biden going to win the nomination? I don't think so. He could. I'm not going to give you a hard prediction, but at this point, I think Sanders has a chance. I think Buttigieg has a chance. I think Biden has some. He's a chaos candidate. Look, I would vote for Biden, but he's got some problems. I'll just say he's got some problems, and I don't know if he can win the nomination. It's not to say he can't win the nomination, but he could. Nick is bad optics. Yeah, a lot of the jokes he makes where he's like, this is probably going to get me banned off YouTube. This is probably against the terms of service, but I'm going to say it anyway. Oh, here's a slur against sexual minorities. I'm going to use that even though everyone knows that's against the terms of service, even though we know, Steven Crowder got demonetized essentially for doing exactly that. So it's like, I think he just wants to be banned off YouTube, which I don't think is a good idea. If you're trying to reach a mass audience. Now, if you're trying to reach a small audience of intellectuals, maybe you don't need YouTube. But for what he's trying to do, I don't know. I guess we'll see. If DLive lets him say all the things that he does indefinitely, then I guess he's got a sustainable business model. But I don't know how long DLive is going to be around, to be honest. I really don't know. I don't know. We'll see. But I don't say like, look, if crashing this YouTube live streaming thing is part of his plan, then apparently he's got a plan. And people make fun of that. It's like, oh, that's so stupid. He has a plan. It's like he is the most popular live streamer right winger on YouTube. And he is kind of the most influential person in that whole thing going on right now. So it's like he is a smart guy. So I don't criticize him like, oh, Nick shouldn't do that. Nick should do this instead. It's like he's his own guy. He's been very successful. I'm sure he'll continue to be successful, but I'm not going for the same thing he is. Man, it's like it is a sad thing that everyone else has been banned off YouTube to the point where I feel like my audience pretty much watches him and me. And so like everything's just a comparison between him and me. I feel like when he does get banned off YouTube, that's probably going to end, which I'm assuming has to be pretty soon, but I don't know. The guys are beta orbiters. I'm content with orbiting Ken. He teaches me things. Ken deserves orbiters. He would if he worked on his shoulders and neck muscles. Yeah, I have an extremely long neck, which makes it look very thin. And that's what it is. That's what it is. I mean, that's just, I'm an endomorph. I'm not this big, I'm not built for fighting. Like a fighter, like the head is basically directly attached to the shoulders so that if you punch someone's head, like it doesn't move. Whereas I'm kind of like a wacky, wavy, inflatable arm man, which is fine. That's just how I am. But you can't really build your neck muscles. Like you either have a thick neck or you don't. It's very hard to build your neck muscles up without like seriously endangering your neck. Like wrestlers, they do these neck exercises, and you can very easily destroy your neck. And also, you start snoring, and there's all kinds of things that happen. So, shirt is too small. Looks like something you would wear to a certain kind of bar. I don't think it's too small. I've got some slack. It's not like exploding. It's loose enough on me. I mean, I'm not gonna start flat. I mean, there's wrinkles in the shirt. I mean, you can see the wrinkles. I say if you can see wrinkles, I don't think it's too small. But whatever you say, Brian. Keith Woods makes good content. MMA is better than big muscles. Keith Woods always sounds. I'm not going to read that. Brian, don't disrespect Keith Woods. He's a nice guy. If you have big muscles, that's not even true. I don't even agree with your insult. That's not even a good insult. If you have big muscles, you'll be the preferred candidate in applying for a job stocking shelves. That's not even true. That's not even true. Was Alexander the Great natty? Possibly. Sorry, Kenneth. Oh, I'm a gainlet. Okay. Yeah, I am biased. If I had a big, thick neck, all my ideas, all my opinions would be different. It's just, the way you're born determines your ideology. Big muscles equals managers making you do physically demanding tasks. Debate between Kenneth and the Golden One. I don't know what we would even debate. I don't even know what would happen. I don't think that would be a very interesting debate. I don't think we'd have anything to talk about. As far as I know, he's just like, live a good life, don't watch porn. It's like, okay, I mean, what's there to debate? Big muscles ultimately made Arnold Schwarzenegger the governor of California. Yeah, but they didn't help him lift California. They helped him. It's a social thing. It's not a physical thing. Debate between Ken and Bap. I don't know if I could handle his fake Slavic accent. 56% me. My thought Kenneth was converting to Islam. You don't have to convert to Islam just because you read the Quran. I mean, do people understand that or what? Okay, so the scrolling has gone ridiculous. I can't find where I was. Propaganda. Nope. Kenneth says being a hypocrite is okay. Also says it's immoral. I don't say it's okay to be a hypocrite. I say it's better to be a hypocrite than to be like, well, I do X, therefore X is okay. So I don't know if you're listening or how carefully you're listening, but I think I've been pretty consistent. Pretty consistent in my hypocrisy. It's a complicated, morality is a complicated thing. Look, we have instincts and we have intellect. Our instincts tell us to do bad things. Our intellect tells us to do good things. We end up somewhere in the middle, depending on how much self-control you have. Everybody's in a different place. Some people are alcoholics. Some people are gambling addicts. Some people are just, their lives are destroyed. And some people are doing quite well for themselves. So the level of self-control you have really determines your ability to be successful. And I think it's not so much about eliminating bad behaviors, but focusing on the positive. I don't think it's so much of, it's like the devil plays with idle hands or whatever. So if you're focused on doing positive things, you're not going to have time to be doing evil things. So that's my sermon for the day. Hairdressing. Vietnamese tend to specialize in being nail technicians. That's their niche. We have good cuisine. I like the cuisine. Nobody cares about Iowa. I think Biden finished 4th. I like Vietnamese. Sanders, Pete, Warren, Biden. I guess Vietnamese run gambling rings. You finally read Hypermodernity? No, I didn't read it. I just watched some videos. I remember recommending it 5 months ago. I didn't read it. I just watched the videos. But if you don't want to watch 100 videos by him, you can go read the book. Have you read Art After Metaphysics? Nope. What do you do for your hair? I'm worried about balding. That's genetics, bro. If you're going to be bald, you're going to be bald. Nothing you can do. You can get like hair transplant surgery. But as far as I know, there's pretty much nothing you could do. Oh, I guess you can take some like weird chemicals. Why is this guy so money hungry? Because people are making demands. If you want something, you have to give something. I put out content that I like to produce. If you want me to do something that I don't enjoy, you're going to have to start paying me money. So the idea that, oh, do this, do that. Well, how about you pay me money? How about, oh, now you don't want to talk anymore. Oh, now I'm greedy. Do you see a Patreon link anywhere? No. So I don't ask people for money to pay me to do things that I enjoy. But if you want me to do something I don't enjoy, then contribute. Dennett's argument for minoritarianism helped rehabilitate me, and I'm sure many others. Very dynamic thinker. You have synthetic thinking power in the Kantian sense. He's turning into an e-girl. I guess that's I guess an e-girl produces content to get money. I produce content because I enjoy it. Well, maybe she also does it for attention. Maybe I am an e-girl, and that's okay. You know what? I am a gender fluid e-girl, and that's fine. I'm happy with that. I'm a very greedy e-girl. That's fine. I need money for onions. Buy me this, send me money to know this about me. Well, it's just like a response. Oh, do this, do that. And it's like, you're joking about that, so I'm joking about you actually, provide. There's all these demands that are being asked. So I'm making a reciprocal demand. If you're going bald, you're going bald. Medications would decrease the rate of hair loss. There are side effects. Extremely deep cleavage. He's loving life because of his haircut. In this moment, I am euphoric. Hypermodernity, he is a brand projecting onto us from a self-luminous surface, an assemblage of unrooted signifiers, no sign regime, totally idiosyncratic. Do you think we will move beyond the era of materialist ontology? Like you were saying, feminism reduces fetuses and ultimately humans to clumps of cells. Do you see a future beyond materialism? Yeah, I think that's going to come in the second religiousness represented by totalitarian liberalism. Why don't you start a Patreon? Because I am not really, it's not like my purpose here. Again, if I was investing a bunch of resources into these videos and I was like, hey guys, I'm kind of spending a lot of money on these videos, maybe you should like compensate me with a little Patreon stuff. I don't really feel the best about asking for money. Like, I feel like there should be something reciprocal. Like, right now, I make the video because I want to make the video. But if at some point I felt like this was a job, then yeah, I would ask for money. I would ask for donations from people because I'd be like, look, at this point, it's not just something I do for fun. At this point, it's something I do, like, in a serious way. And so, could you please donate? I mean, I'm not really opposed to that. I don't think that's bad. I just don't think I'm really at that point. I don't know if I ever will be at that point. If you want to send me money, I have a D-Live channel, and you can send me money on D-Live. So it's the first video on my channel is a link to my D-Live page, Kenneth Brown on D-Live. So It's already there. Like, people can already send me money. I haven't even gotten $10 on D Live, so I don't see the point. What would be the point of starting a Patreon when I can't even get $10 on D Live, and I've had the D Live for like a month or two or however long it's been. So I don't see the point of the Patreon versus the D Live. D Live seems to me like the best and easiest way for people to do donations, and people don't want to do donations, and that's not fine. I mean, that is fine. That's not a I meant to say that's not a problem, and then I shifted to that's fine. Freudian slip. You must donate money. If you have not donated money, I am guilt tripping you. I think you mean ectomorph, not endomorph. Maybe I do mean ectomorph. I always confuse. I always think exo is like ecto, like big, and then endomorph would be small. But maybe I'm reversing it. I'm all mixed up. We're nearing the end of the stream here. I'm a gender fluid e-girl, and that's fine. Yep, that's true. The biochemical mechanisms underpinning male pattern baldness are very complex. It's not just genes. Might post something about it in the Discord. Reading chats doesn't seem like a job. Well, I mean, I could just ignore the chats, right? But then what would be the point of live streaming? And the way this started is I used to just make videos, and then people would comment, and then I would make video responses to comments. So like, I do read people's comments, you know. I'm not just ignoring everything that everybody Oh man, there's some funny stuff going on. There's some funny stuff going on in the DMs right now, but that's okay. We're going to leave that alone. We're going to leave that aside. We're not going to even touch that. We're not even going to think about that right now because we got to create an invite. You people have been watching the stream. You've been thumbs upping the stream. You've been doing all these nice things for me, so I'm going to throw out a little Discord invite. Now, the reason I have a Discord, to reiterate, is not for you to post edgy stuff. It's not for you to get me in trouble or anything like that. The purpose of the Discord is that if you want to come on the show, if you have something to say, if you want to have a debate, an argument, a discussion, then you can hop on Discord, we can schedule, and you can come on the show, and we can do a show together. That's the purpose of the Discord. Or you can give me suggestions for the show, or you can write an essay or something like that. But do not view the Discord as like we're going to use this Discord to like repost racism from the internet. Like, that's not the purpose of the Discord. Can't actually send money to a DLive channel if you're not streaming. Okay, well then I will stream right now. I will go on DLive and I'll start streaming right now. And if you want to contribute to me, then you can head over to DLive and I will be streaming, and you can do something like that. So right after I end this, so head over to my DLive now. I'm going to end this stream, and you can go to DLive, and we'll see what happens. What made you want to read the Quran? It's a beautiful book which contains much wisdom and knowledge. Very disappointing people hate on it. Pete made me read the Quran. John David Ebert isn't the greatest philosopher. Sacrilege. What do you see as his most insightful field? I would say art history is a good one. Retracting message. So we're going to end the stream there. We're going to switch over to DLive. If you want to continue talking to me, seeing what I say, it is, what is the link here for my channel? I'll just throw it in here. It's dlive.tv/Kenneth Brown. The Discord is to fight for our people. Okay. Very funny. But that is the link. So give me 30 seconds. I'm going to be on DLive, and we'll have a little after party, I suppose. To the rest of you who are not interested in continuing this small adventure, thanks for listening. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for thumbsing up the video and spreading the video to your friends and family and spreading the minoritarian message in the Jockle podcast. Thank you, and I will see you on DLive. Bye-bye.